Previously on Stay in Your Lane.
Welcome back to Stay in Your Lane. I'm your host, John Maley, and today I'm going to pass it over to Dan North, Chief Economist, North America for Allianz Trading. And we've had you on a few times, Dan. Go ahead and tell us what to watch out for.
Let's take a look a little bit further at how we get to fuel prices. And this is a pretty interesting chart. And it really raises the question of who's gouging. You know, there's this idea of companies are gouging consumers. Let me take a look at this picture before we go into the text. This is what we pay for a gallon of gasoline. And this was March of 2022. Crude oil takes up about 59% of a gallon of gasoline. That's the cost of a gallon of gasoline. Then there's 18% for refining, 12% for distribution and marketing, and 12% for taxes. And on the right is diesel. It's a similar thing. So governments are taking 12 to 11% of taxes right off the top. Sellers are making somewhere between 2 and 10%. So who's price gouging there? I would suggest that governments need to have a careful look in the mirror about who is driving prices up. Now,
I would agree.
Yeah. So it's also interesting to note that a lot of people feel that fuel prices, diesel, gasoline prices, don't come back down as rapidly as they go up. And they're right. That's true of just about the price of any good. It goes up and then it's sticky. It won't come back down really quickly. But it's true also that fuel prices do not rise or fall as rapidly as oil prices. And that's because you sort of have this ballast here of the cost of a gallon of fuel. This can go up and down, but there's all this ballast here that, if you will, that'll keep it from changing too much. And I also want to talk about this idea of gouging. And there's some facts to consider here. So we've been hearing all this about, Exxon's making record profits in the second quarter. Doesn't that mean they're gouging? And the answer is no. No. Let's consider this. First, they had better make record profits. They're selling products into the largest economy in the history of the world. And this idea of record profits, well, that's meaningless without considering how much sales. So they had $111 billion of sales with profits of $18 billion. That's a 16% net margin. In 2019, it was 5%. In 2020, it was negative. And overall, generally speaking, it's less than across all industries. So yeah, sure, when Exxon made record profits, but it was on record sales, high margin that's temporary, and generally speaking is lower than across all industry. If you look, for instance, at Apple, well, their net margin's 20 to 25%. That's huge. Why is nobody mad at Apple? Well, you don't have to buy an iPhone. You have to buy gas. You have to buy diesel. I get it, but you have to have some perspective here. It's also important to realize nobody was really upset when Exxon lost money in 2015 and 2020. There was no talk about reverse gouging then.
Yeah, nobody was trying to pay more at the pump.
Right. But you probably should have if Exxon was losing money, because you own Exxon. And what I mean is, it's not some secretive group of mega wealthy people. If you have a retirement account, you own part of the S&P 500. Exxon's a big part of that. It's not some mysterious group. It's owned by retirement accounts. So, you really do want to have companies that you're investing in, that you own, making money. So there really isn't gouging. And it's really interesting to note, independents produce 80% of the crude oil in the U.S. Not big companies like Exxon or Valero or Shale. It's small independent companies produce 80% of the crude here in the U.S. And going to the right over here, mom and pops, mom and pop stores sell around 80% of fuel. Again, not Exxon, Valero, or Shell. It's those mom and pops, and you can see it in this chart. Most fuel, 57% of fuel, is sold by businesses that have one station, mom and pop,
So they're privately
and
owned.
privately owned, and often convenience stores. And that's where the money is. It's inside the store. It's
Right.
soda and candy and cigarettes.
You say that like those things are bad.
Now, I didn't say they're bad. All I'm saying is that they make almost no money on gasoline.
Right.
Average profit margin is around 2%, and that's versus 8% against all industries. What that means is if someone steals a tank of gas, that station is going to have to fill 50 more cars just to break even.
Break even.
Yeah, yeah. So
Right.
gouging, this idea of gouging is most of the oil is produced by independents. You have to look at how much has been sold and take into account kind of the long term and the fact that margins for big companies, big oil companies, are less than all industries. And the actual sellers of the gasoline are small mom and pops, not big ones. So, there's some things to consider there in terms of gouging, and it makes you realize that people in government really have very little understanding about business, and in particular this business. Otherwise, they couldn't say with a straight face what they're saying.
I would agree with that statement.
That's right. Companies have to make a profit. Europe is saying now to Putin, we're not going to buy oil if it's above a certain cap. And he's like, fine, I just won't sell it. And it's the same thing with price controls all the time. It seems like such a great idea. Gasoline prices spinning out of control. Government comes along and says, you can't sell it above $6 a barrel. I can't make any money. I'm not going to be able to sell any. I think it's missed by government. Seems like such a simple idea, but usually backfires.
2 and 2 is 4. Now, what are your thoughts on, since Europe, a lot of Europe is saying they're not helping Russia, which I understand the principle of, but where are they going to come? They coming to the United States?
Right. So it's actually most of the energy concern is that natural gas in Europe, which is really facing an energy crisis where they're basically doing voluntary rationing now. They're building up stores as rapidly as they can, turning down the temperature, many different things, but they're going to have to try to make it up somehow. And in the long term, they're going to make it up by bringing stuff from the US, bringing stuff from other pipelines, increasing energy efficiency and so forth. But what's going to have to happen, and has happened already, is they're going to have to go back to coal. In fact, they've kept plants online that they didn't plan to, burning coal. And this is a big setback for the green movement, particularly in Germany. So, that's the quick way. And they're going to keep the nuclear plants open, which they were planning on decommissioning as well, because that's a really easy way to plug the gap, but again, politically unpalatable.
You don't see a big push coming where we're going to try and supply our allies what they're in need of, or do you think they're going to be able to go to coal for it all?
We want to supply LNG, for instance, because Europe's so dependent on natural gas. That takes time to build terminals on both ends. They're specialized terminals. So it's not like you can do that in 6 months either. So as much as we might like to be able to do that, and we would like to be able to sell petroleum products to the rest of the world, it's going to take time to fill in those blanks, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So hopefully they don't have too cold a winter. They're building up stores, and we'll keep our fingers crossed. But it's a real energy crisis there in Europe. I've got one more thing to show you. There's this idea that this has all been Putin's price hike, and quite honestly, that's an insult to our intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean is, without going into the charts here in a lot of depth, on the left-hand chart is West Texas Intermediate. And let's just look at the table. Year-to-date price increases are up 24%. Since the invasion, prices of oil have been up 7%. Since that supply shock in 2020, they've been up 440%. That's where it happened, down here, not because of the invasion. Same thing over here on the right, gasoline, since the invasion, 11%. Since 520, 100% down here. That's where it happened. So, that's kind of this idea that it's Putin's price hike is again is well, it's hard to understand how people can say that with a straight face. The OPEC Plus cuts really, I think, are not going to have a whole lot of effect. Strategic petroleum reserves seems to be helping, but I think it's a risky idea. And this idea of price gouging, honestly, again, this is where I think the people that listen to your podcast are going to call up and say, "Hey, that guy, don't have him again."
You bring it direct, and that's what we appreciate. But what I'm thankful for our viewers is that they understand that you've been doing this a long time. How long have you been doing this, Dan?
Over 30 years. Over 30 years.
I'm going to listen. There's wisdom in there. I'm not going to get it from Apple. I'm sorry. I'm not going to get it from the media. I'm going to go to you. Now, where do you see us in the next 3, 6, and 9 months? Because from when we originally spoke, you said and shared with us, once policy changes, fiscal policy changes, which was interest rate hikes, 3 to 5 quarters for us to see and really feel the impact of those changes.
Right. So the Federal Reserve has been raising interest rates since March. They're controlling monetary policy, which is raising rates. And they've been pretty clear that they thought inflation would be more under control by now, but it's not. And so they have to keep communicating, saying, we're not giving up. We are going to keep raising rates until the job is done. And that's another tool they use. They not only raise rates, but they can talk to people about raise rates. They can communicate.
Are we going back to the Jimmy Carter era where we see double-digit home loans from the 80s?
Gosh, I don't think that that's going to be the case, because the Federal Reserve has been extremely aggressive in raising that overnight Fed funds rate, which has such an influence on the economy and on mortgage rates, for instance. Very, very aggressive. They're going to raise another 75 basis points in November. Typically, what they do at meetings is they raise by 25 basis points. And there are 8 meetings during a year. Well, this will be, I think, I could be wrong. This might be the 4th meeting in a row where they went 75 basis points. It's very unusual. So they're super hot, super aggressive, which they have to be. They're so late. And this is what the business cycle is. You go in and out of recessions. They last for a certain period of time. It seems horrible when you're in the middle of it. It is horrible in the middle of it. But we come out on the other end. It's just going to be a while.
Well, rest assured, your spot here is more than safe. And to any of our viewers, anybody that wants to comment, please feel free to comment and share with us what your thoughts are. Dan, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the wisdom. And I'm glad to see you back, getting after it.
Thank you.
Forward to having you on again in the future, and thank you.
Okay. Cheers. Bye-bye.